Hello, I'm Doug Dormer. I teach at Indiana University in Indianapolis. In the, as I'll tell you more in a moment, I teach courses in health informatics and health information technology to master students. One of the things that friends have asked is, "Gee, if you record these lectures, can I watch some of your lectures? This sounds like really interesting stuff." Well, there are a bunch of reasons why that's not a practical way to go. But what I am doing this semester is, I think, maybe worth looking at a way I can communicate this beyond my classroom. The class I'm teaching this semester is Consumer Health Informatics, which really is about how do we empower you, how do we use technology to empower the patient as a consumer, I think, to be at the center of their own health, at least on par with the medical system, the healthcare system. Now, with that in mind, let me take you through some thoughts on this introductory video about the program that I intend to teach over the next 4 months. So we're calling it Consumer Health Informatics, Empowering the Patient as a Consumer. And as we look at ourselves as consumers in so many other ways, whether it's using Google or Amazon. I mean, you've bought something on Amazon, and next thing you know, you're seeing ads for similar products coming in through Facebook or on Google searches. And it has to make you wonder, if we have this much capability, if we have so many applications out there, why is it we don't see more consumer involvement, more patient involvement in our own healthcare? That's the question we're going to be exploring in the next 4 months. So this will be organized into modules published roughly once a week. It'll be organized so this first module has, and that I will give today, has 3 lessons in the first module. So this is the first lesson in module 1. So it's a pivotal moment for empowering patients as consumers through technology. So here are some of the reasons I think it's a critical moment, pivotal moment. First, the evidence supports consumer health information technology, and I've been involved in some of that and demonstrated considerable success through technology, and I'm sure I'll tell you about that as we go. Also, consumers clearly want to be more engaged in their health and to be empowered through technology. And of course, technology is capable of supporting really innovative consumer health informatics solutions, more so than in the past. A side note, I recall earlier in my career, I'll say, I felt like I was always 6 months ahead of the technology. Today, I see the technology is there, and it's a question of how do I corral it? How do I get those technology puppies in the box to be able to assemble or to apply? It's a very different field than it was 10, certainly years ago or more. The regulatory environment is making progress. We'll spend a fair bit of time talking about what's happened in the last 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years. The incoming Republican administration, however, will disrupt things and will consider in some detail what the policies of the Republican administration will do, excuse me, excuse me, or the effect that these Republican policies will have on the evolution of consumer health informatics. So the question really comes down to, will 2025 be a big step forward for consumer health informatics? And if so, what will that step forward look like? Or will it be an incremental change, kind of not losing ground, but not really gaining as much as we might think would be possible? Or will it, in fact, be a step backward? That's the core question we're going to consider over the next series of modules over the next 4 months. So a bit of an introduction then. This is not intended to be a survey course of the present state of consumer health informatics, although a lot of that's going to be included. It is not a lecture where I preach, and certainly my students in the school would memorize, but rather what this is a discussion. I hope that it's a seminar with you as well, with you as people who aren't in my class, who aren't in the master's program, but have an interest, whether it's as a consumer, a patient, a technologist, a healthcare practitioner, or in any other capacity. I hope this becomes a discussion, and therefore I'll think of it more as a seminar. And ultimately, I hope there's some cross-pollination between my class of master students and hopefully a few folks who choose to follow this series. Questions, of course, that the seminar will be discussing along the thread I just mentioned will be, what role does technology play in empowering patients and consumers in their health? And of course, what are the barriers and determinants of success for consumer health informatics? Which leads to some relevant questions. Will providers embrace consumer health informatics? That's actually the second question. Let's see, the first question should be, what are the benefits of CHI and is it worth it? Then we'll ask, will providers embrace consumer health informatics? And of course, that will be reflected by who will pay for it, if it will be paid for. Excuse me. Which then will barely be ahead of the critical question, what are the risks for providers of trying to incorporate consumer health informatics in their practice? A significant part of our discussion will revolve around understanding those risks. Then we'll be spending earlier rather than later an interesting discussion about the relationship between consumer health informatics and evidence-based practice. Then, of course, there's a critical question. Will we be thinking of consumer health informatics as an integrated solution, part of the healthcare technology network as a whole? Or will it be what we call a freely spinning wheel? For example, I'm wearing an Oura ring on my finger that provides really interesting information about certainly sleep, but also tracking and mapping activities when I run or cycle. It's got a wealth of information which doesn't connect in any, at least technology way, to my electronic health records or to the practice of medicine as it relates to my health. So that would be what we call a freely spinning wheel. Then we have to ask what form or forms of CHI will thrive in this environment. And finally, we'll be asking, what is the impact of the present moment for providers, for HI professionals, and for patients? Now, who am I? Well, I've mentioned already, I teach in the Department of Biomedical Engineering and Informatics at the Luddy School of Information, Computing, and Engineering at Indiana University in Indianapolis. And that's sort of the short-term version of who I am, but let me give you a little more background that I think will allow you to assess whether I have much value for you in this or not. I have to begin by saying I don't have a master's degree or a PhD. I just have a Bachelor of General Studies degree from the University of Michigan, where I studied economics and accounting and journalism and history of art, which for me has been a perfect background. But that's not really the origin of my interest in health information technology or healthcare generally. I think every one of us has a personal story. So I'd like to tell you a bit of mine as we work through the definition of who I am. My father was the longest living survivor of the first group of human subjects ever to receive insulin for diabetes in 1922. There's quite a story there. I won't take your time today, but I'd love to tell you another time. For this purpose, the part of the story is that in around sorry, I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat today. In 1960, when I was very small, he had a reaction. Too much insulin, not enough, leading to a coma. And the ambulance that day, rather than, in our fairly small town, I should say, in Michigan's Upper Peninsula along the shore of Lake Superior, rather than take him to the hospital which we were closest to, and there were two hospitals in our small town, rather than take him to the hospital where he was a frequent flyer and known, they took him to the other hospital for reasons that don't really matter. It's just what they did that day, where they didn't know him and where they assumed he was drunk. And so they made the decision to let him sleep it off on a gurney in the hall, which then is where he died. So while the direct cause of my father's death was diabetes, It's hard not to argue that the real cause was a lack of health information exchange, a lack of health information technology, a lack of patient engagement through technology to know and to track and to participate in what was going on with a family member. So I'm here with some personal interest. I don't necessarily think I feel that, but I think it's also hard to deny that that must have some impact somewhere in my history. Now, after college, I spent time as a certified public accountant with one of what was then one of the big 8 CPA firms, where I did a lot of work in insurance and in healthcare and in finance. And so I learned a lot about risk models. And for example, in a related, surprisingly close, but sounds a little different, in a related way, for one of the big 3 car companies, I was the accountant who evaluated their product liability reserve. That means every year when you sell $10 million worth of cars, you have to say how much will be what's the present value of the amount of money I'm going to have to pay for claims or liability as it relates to those sales. So you match the revenue with the cost. Well, that calculation of cost is straight up an insurance model, a risk model. And so I was grounded deeply in those, both from my work with insurance companies, through finance, even with manufacturing, as I say, and certainly with healthcare. In fact, at that time, early in my career, I was a co-author through that job because of my work in healthcare of a book helping hospitals and departments in hospitals think of themselves as profit centers. That was very early, in the very early stages of the shift from fee for service to value-based care, trying to get hospitals to think, look, your job isn't to just spend money. Your job in these departments is to think about how much money are you making and begin to think as businesses. That led to me moving more into becoming more of a technologist. And so I became involved in all kinds of fascinating systems, including health information exchange, also involving some work around electronic bill presentment and supply chain work, and significantly bank customer portals, the things we use every day. The ability to log on to your phone, access your bank account, transfer some money through Zelle, whatever you need to do, pay bills. Those were the technologies in which I was involved through the 1990s, which set me up to say, my gosh, this has got to come to healthcare. This kind of connectivity focused on the consumer has to come to healthcare. So beginning in about 2006, I formed a company and was involved deeply in consumer health informatics, and I'm sure I'll tell you about that as we go. Since 2010, I've been involved with Indiana University in Indianapolis, originally called at that time, Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, IUPUI, more recently called Indiana University, Indianapolis. And so I've been involved leading projects of graduate students. We've had public papers published. It's led to grants, applications. It's led to applications being developed around consumer health informatics. And it's led to some struggles, particularly when the first Trump administration came in and financing from the federal government radically shifted, priorities shifted. And so I think I have some rather interesting value to contribute. And then I've been a teacher at the university since 2022, teaching consumer health informatics, the business of health informatics, and health information exchange. All right, that's it on this first video. Let's pause, and if you want, you should be able to click, if I can set this up as an album or some such in YouTube, you should be able to quickly get to Module 1, Lesson 2.